Hey guys. So today we're going to look at wild animals aren't pets. We're going to analyze it, get a little deeper into it, and see what meaning we can get from it. So, Wild Animals Aren't Pets is actually an editorial that was written, published by USA Today. So, editorials are not signed. Usually they're written by a member of the paper staff, and so they're just published without an author's name. So, the first thing that you look for whenever you're reading an argument is the claim. Okay, so what are they trying to convince us of? If we look here at our title does a pretty good job of letting us know what the claim is. Wild animals aren't pets. So it is a safe bet to say that this author doesn't think that people should own wild animals as pets. Okay, so as we read and as we go through this story, we're going to be looking at not only evidence of the claim that this is what the author thinks, but also we're going to be looking at facts that support this claim. When an author writes an argument, when they write a paper trying to convince people of one way or another, they have the burden to present evidence. And if they can't present that evidence or provide that evidence, then we're not sure that we can believe it. So when you are writing your argument, make sure that you also provide evidence. So don't forget, guys, you have a couple of extra videos, a text and focus and a close read. Watch those as well. They'll provide more information for you. So as we get started, we see our first paragraph says, in many states, anyone with a few $100s and a yen for the unusual can own a python, a black bear, or a big cat as a pet. Now, I want you to notice a couple of things. We start out um, pointing out how easy it is. Anyone with $400, a few $100s can own these as a pet. But notice how they describe pet in quotation marks. So when something is in quotation marks like that, first of all, it provides emphasis, but also it provides a little bit of sarcasm or disbelief. So maybe that people are calling this a pet, but it's not actually a pet. And so that's what the author is trying to get across here. For $8,000, a baby white tiger can be yours. Sometimes wild animals are even offered free. Siberian tigers looking for a good home. Read an ad in the Animal Finder's Guide. So, this whole first paragraph, I don't necessarily see a claim here, but I do see a lot of emotional talk trying to help people understand how easy it is to acquire an exotic animal. And it doesn't talk about any sort of regulations or anything. So this leads us to believe that, okay, it's pretty easy to get an exotic animal. Anyone can do it. On to paragraph 2. Until recently, though, few people knew how easy it is to own a wild animal as a pet, or how potentially tragic. So, again, we see they're playing at our emotions here, potentially tragic. We see this could be dangerous or sad, scary, and that is going to help to persuade the reader to go along with what the author is thinking. But just as a 2007 raid on property owned by football star Michael Vick laid bare the little known and cruel world of dogfighting, a story that unfolded in a small Ohio city recently opened the public's eyes to the little known distressing world of exotic pets. We're not suggesting that people who own these animals are cruel. Many surely love them, but public safety, common sense, and compassion for animals all dictate the same conclusion. Wild animals are not pets. So here we have our claim. Wild animals are not pets. So the author states that. They also provide some different information here. They talk about Michael Vick's dogfighting, which is interesting because it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it. That's just another way of playing on people's emotions. When this article was published, Michael Vick being arrested for dogfighting was very fresh. And so to state this and compare it to owning exotic animals gave the whole idea of owning an exotic animal a very negative feel. So we see that what happened in Ohio opened the public's eyes to the distressing world. So again, we're describing this in a very negative way, and you have quotation marks again, exotic pets. So maybe the author doesn't believe that calling them exotic pets makes them special or that they should be pets. And it says something that is exotic is from another part of the world. Remember that that is one of our vocabulary words. All right, if it weren't already obvious, it became more so when collector Terry Thompson opened the cages on his Zanesville farm, springing dozens of lions, tigers, bears, and other wild creatures before killing himself. With animals running loose and darkness closing in, authorities arrived with no good choices to protect the public. They shot all but a handful of the animals as the nation watched, transfixed and horrified. So, here you might remember that word anecdote. We have an anecdote, a short story that illustrates a point. Okay, and this one is kind of a scary one. A man had some exotic animals, lots of exotic animals. For whatever reason, he turned them all loose in a neighborhood and then killed himself. And so then this was detrimental to both the animals, who most of them ended up shot and killed. It was also not good for the neighbors because they had wild animals running loose in their neighborhood. So, not a great situation for anyone involved. And this is a factual story. However, I still haven't seen many facts to support this opinion. Owners of exotic animals claim they rarely maim or kill, but is the death rate really the point? Okay, so here again, we have exotic in quotation marks. And let's move on to paragraph 6. In 2009, a 2-year-old Florida girl was strangled by a 12-foot long Burmese python, a family pet that had gotten out of his aquarium. That same year, a Connecticut woman was mauled and disfigured by a neighbor's pet chimp. Last year, a caretaker was mauled to death by a bear owned by a Cleveland collector. In Zanesville, it was the animals themselves, including 18 rare Bengal tigers, who became innocent victims. All right, so we have several more anecdotes here. 2009, a girl was strangled by a python. A Connecticut woman was mauled by a neighbor's pet chimp. A caretaker was mauled to death by a bear. And then, of course, we refer back to the incident in Zanesville. Trade in these beautiful creatures thrives in the USA, where thousands are bred and sold through classified ads or at auctions centered in Indiana, Missouri, and Tennessee. There's too little to stop it. So, this is an opinion here. Too little to stop it. Moving on. A 2003 federal law which forbids the interstate transport of certain big cats has stopped much of the trade on the internet, according to the Humane Society of the U.S., but monkeys, baboons, and other primates were left out, and measures to plug that hole have twice stalled in Congress. So we do have a fact here. A 2003 federal law forbids interstate transport of certain cats, and it's kind of stopped trade on the internet. Okay, they also use this word, but they negate that by saying that monkeys, baboons, and primates were left out. So I don't get the feeling that the author is satisfied with that 2003 law. Only collectors who exhibit animals need a federal license. Those such as Thompson, who keep the animals as pets, are left alone, unless states intervene, and many do not. 8, Alabama, Idaho, Ohio, Nevada, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, and Wisconsin have no rules, and in 13 others the laws are lax, according to Born Free USA, which has lobbied for years for stronger laws. So here's a fact. Only collectors who exhibit animals need a federal license. And then it tells us that many states do not. So these 8 states have no rules regarding owning exotic animals. And then in 13 other states, the laws are lax. So that is not a very specific fact. It gives us an idea, but it's not a fact. And of course, there is this organization, which is lobbying for stronger laws regarding exotic animals. After the Cleveland bear mauling, then Ohio Governor Ted Strickland issued an emergency order to ban possession of wild animals. While it exempted current owners, Thompson might have been forced to give up his menagerie because he had been cited for animal cruelty. We'll never know. Strickland's successor, John Kosich, let the order expire. Okay, so we have another fact here that the governor issued an emergency ban on possession of wild animals, exempting current owners, which means if you already had an exotic animal, you didn't have to give it up. It also says Thompson may have been forced to give his up because he had been cited for animal cruelty, but that's a moot point because he was already dead. And then this order was allowed to expire, so it was only in place for a little while. So when we go to back through this story, we notice that there are a lot of claims in this story, this argument. It's not supported by a lot of hard facts. There are several anecdotes which we could look up on the internet and find these anecdotes and prove that they're real. But in general, the author plays on our emotions quite a bit. They use words potentially tragic, distressing world. They tell us about little children being killed and people being mauled, but they also say, is the death rate really the point? So I don't feel personally that they do enough to explain why people should not be allowed to own exotic animals. I personally don't have an opinion on the subject, but this does not persuade me very well. I'm not often persuaded by emotion. I want to see facts, and I don't feel that this story provides enough facts. And in a little while, we'll be reading the counter argument to this, and we're going to do the very same thing. We're going to look and see how many facts do they provide versus how much emotion did they use to try to convince us. And using emotion versus facts is a very popular way that people try to convince other people of things. And it's really easy if you can get someone to use their emotion to make a decision rather than convincing them with facts. It's just easier to play on that. So don't be fooled or convinced by only using what someone is trying to play on your emotions with. So I feel like we have gone through this story. We've really gotten the gist of it. The fact that this author does not think that people in general should be allowed to own exotic animals. They think that the laws should be stronger regarding this. And so as we continue, we will read the counter argument.